transcended since
well,
then.
Well, the struggle that we're now dealing with is that, and it's very interesting, the dynamic that's taking place. So you literally are having right-wing political interests who are using the civil rights laws that were passed to benefit African Americans now against African Americans. When you look at Civil Rights Act that was passed in the 1860s, 1870s, you literally have it happening right now with the targeting of the Fearless Fund. You now have interests that are trying to use the 14th Amendment, which was one of the 3 Reconstruction Amendments, in order to get rid of various programs. It's literally happening right now. Even politically, they're trying to use the 14th Amendment to get rid of, that could literally wipe out half of the Congressional Black Caucus.
Yes.
And so I don't think people are really paying attention to what is happening.
Right. They
when
hear
you look
about Texas, they hear about
but this is a national thing.
National.
So you take the Supreme Court ruling where they ban the use of affirmative action in colleges. Mm-hmm. Well, 1 week after that decision, Arkansas Republican Senator Tom Cotton and others were sending letters to law firms saying, oh, this applies to all of your fellowship programs, your scholarship programs. They were hitting corporate America. That's a lot. The Supreme Court ruling only applies to colleges and universities. But they wanted to extend that. And so now what you're seeing is you are literally seeing corporations that are scared to death because I dare say we have never seen a more vindictive administration that uses the power of the government to force corporations, law firms, and others to do their bidding. I spoke a couple weeks ago at the Black Women's Expo in Chicago. There were 6, 8, 10 companies that traditionally have supported that conference that were not there. There was one telecommunications company that said, we can't support your conference because we are governed by the FCC and they are looking at every single event that we sponsor. There were some sponsors who literally went to the organizer and said, can you not call it the Black Women's Expo? Can you take black off? I mean, I don't think people really understand what we're now dealing with. And you saw in the case of, when the FCC approved the Paramount merger, Brendan Carr, who's the FCC commissioner, literally said, I'm not approving this merger unless you get rid of all of your DEI programs. You get rid of all of them. They are literally, they're using the power of the federal government to literally go after all of these companies. So supplier diversity is real. The attack on supplier diversity. When you look at the federal DBE program, the Trump administration is on record as telling a federal judge they want to wipe that program out. That is a $37 billion program that they want to get rid of.
Right.
And there was a case out of Indiana where 2 white male contractors sued, saying the program is discriminatory. Now, mind you, last year under Biden-Harris, black-owned businesses got $10 billion in federal contracts, which was the most ever, but that represented less than 2%.
Correct.
Now, 78% of the DBE contracts go to white women.
Yes.
And see, this is where we have to have some serious conversations, in that the problem that we see in this country is that white women have been extremely silent on these attacks. And the folk that have been standing up have been African Americans, primarily, Latinos, but white women have benefited more. And facts are facts. No group has benefited from affirmative action more than white women in America. In every city, state, county, federal government, but they are extremely silent when we're seeing the attacks right now. Mm-hmm. So if that program gets wiped out, that's not going to wipe out black businesses. It's not going to wipe out Latino businesses. 78% of the $37 billion goes to white women. And so what we're looking at right now and I've been saying this, what we are facing right now, specifically when it comes to African Americans, there's a concerted effort to defund Black America, to attack the entire civil rights, economic, nonprofit, educational infrastructure.
But wasn't that happening even before Roland?
No, we've never seen what you saw was you saw some efforts, but this is a direct attack on. I mean, you have a case out of Arkansas where, and it's already the appeals court has ruled in their favor. And it's going to go to the Supreme Court, where they are saying that the only people that can file a voting rights lawsuit is the Department of Justice. Meaning ACLU, NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, Black Voters Matter, LULAC. So traditionally, when you look at most voting rights cases, civil rights organizations have been filing those lawsuits. Individuals have been filing those lawsuits. The case, if you look at the congressional case out of Louisiana, so you have individual plaintiffs. This suit says, no, only the Department of Justice can file a lawsuit against a voting case. And we know with this Department of Justice, they don't give a damn about protecting the voting rights of people of color. So those are just facts. So we have to recognize what we're dealing with. And so then they're using the power of the federal government to then tell states, if you don't do this, I'm withholding funding.
Correct.
And the next thing is going to be county, we're going to withhold funding. City, we're going to withhold funding. School district, we're going to withhold funding. And in my book, White Fear, I mean, I've been talking about this since 2009. And folks were just sitting and walking around. There's this great scene from the show Scandal when Joe Morton says to Kerry Washington character, he said, you're running through a field where bombs are going off. You're mistaking them for daisies. Yep. I don't think people really understand what is happening. And there is an all-out assault on the economic and civil rights progress that we've seen over the last 60 years, and they want to wipe all of that out.
All of it out. And they've been quietly doing it, right? Targeting different sectors.
Now, they haven't been quiet. A lot of us have not been paying attention.
Right.
That's the problem.
That is.
And we've been listening to folk talk about other stuff. That's the problem.
Yes.
And I need people to understand, because listen, this is a diverse crowd. So you got black folks in here, you got white folks, Latino, Asian American, Native American, you got gay, straight, Christian, atheist, all this. Let's be clear. My man John Hope Bryan talks about this here, and he says all the time. He said, and there's some fundamental things that we just have to accept. Mm-hmm. And I remember a decade ago, Newsweek had a story that showed that in about 10 to 12 states, the white death rate was higher than the white birth rate. Facts are facts. White people cannot have enough kids to catch up. That's just a fact.
But you ban abortion.
But follow me here. You have to be thinking about what is America's GDP going to be in 30, 40 years. So you take China. China adopted more than 30 years ago one child rule. One child. Now they said, oh my God, too many people, one child. They weren't that smart. Because somebody didn't realize that the folks then who were 50 in 30 years will be 80. And all of a sudden, China's population, folks started dying. They were like, shit, we ain't got enough people. So what did they do? They had to change the one child and say, okay, y'all can have two.
Yeah.
The problem is, there's going to be a problem even in 30 years because you hope they have two. We have to recognize that this is what is going on. And see, we don't want to have this conversation because it's about mortality, things along those lines. But we see it. Let's just take Springfield, Ohio. When J.D. Vance and Trump were attacking the Haitian immigrants, Springfield, Ohio was dying. They had lost some 30, 40,000 people. 20,000 Haitians come in. It was reviving the town. Jobs, housing. Now people were complaining about, oh my God, this is hurting our city. I'm like, no, you were dying. You have to replace population. We can go all through this state, Illinois, Indiana. We go all through the Rust Belt states, and we can show you all of these towns that used to have thriving businesses, manufacturing, but when that manufacturing facility left, the entire town died. Why? Because that facility That's what the restaurant, the convenience store, the grocery store, other jobs, you lose that, you lose the entire economic piece. So what we are facing right now is a battle with folk who want to hold on to, let's get rid of all undocumented immigrants. We don't want folk from African nations. We don't want any of this, thinking that they're stalling something when you're not. By 2043, the nation is going to be majority of people of color. If you do not have an educated workforce by 2040, 2050, then who the hell are going to do all of the jobs?
Absolutely. And we cannot unbrown this country.
No, I mean, just,
right?
and look, people, Fox News goes on and on about the great replacement theory. I'm sorry. I'm not white. I ain't got kids. I don't. My wife and I, we don't have kids. I've raised 6 of my nieces. But the fact of the matter is, you have to acknowledge the reality that the white birth rate and the American birth rate has been dropping. Look at what's happening in Europe. Every single one of those countries. The past decade, they had massive immigration battles. And they were fighting African immigration. Well, guess what happened? The Italians stopped having kids. The French stopped having kids. The Germans stopped having kids. The only reason Germany has been able to maintain its GDP is because of immigration. Now they hate it, but the country is still an economic power because of immigration. Ireland, they're complaining about Conor McGregor, who, of course, was convicted in the civil court of sexual assault. He's at the White House. Maybe they hang out. He was complaining about the indigenous people in Ireland being replaced by immigrants. Dude, your population is decreasing. And so at some point, we have to have honest, real conversations that if population is leaving and towns are dying, the town will go away because you do not have a population to sustain it, because you have to have housing, you have to have an economic base, a tax base, a job base. And I think too many of us got our heads stuck in the sand and we're listening to crazy folk, not realize this is an economic issue that will be catastrophic for this country in 30 years. And if we keep listening to crazy folk today, 30 years from now, we're going to look up and say, what the hell happened? Easy, because we were playing games in 2025, not realizing what we needed to be focusing on was 2050 and 2075.
Right. So let's talk about businesses. There are a lot of businesses, especially businesses of color right now, that are a part of supply chains that have either been cut or their contracts haven't been renewed at the same rate, if at all, and public and private sector,
yep.
right?
So,
they're fearful, they're disappointed, they're angry, and they're scrambling, right? They're trying to figure out what to do. What are your thoughts? I'm going to ask this in two parts. What are your thoughts about the way that these programs were set up on the private sector and the public sector?
Well, first, and again, this is where we got to stop playing games and really be honest. When you look at American history, and I look at when you look at the Black Freedom Movement, it's called Civil Rights Movement, it was a 13-year period. So some say, let's say, it begins with the lynching of Emmett Till, August 28, 1955, Montgomery bus boycott, December 1st, 1955, last 382 days. And then you go through those 13 years, Civil Rights Act of 64, Voting Rights Act of 65, Fair Housing Act of 1968. So if you use 1970 as the marker, if you will, that means that African Americans have only been technically fully free in America for 55 years. I'm 57 in November, which means that I was actually born not fully free, technically. Now, why do I say that? If you start tracing, the reality is African Americans were completely shut out of corporate America. Jackie Robinson was the first vice president of a company. That was in the 1960s. Jackie Robinson was. When I was, there was an event at the Treasury Department, I met the first African American hired at a bank in Louisiana, and that was in 1968. Your first wave of African Americans in corporate America took place in the early 1970s. Your second wave came in the 1980s. And so it's not like we're talking about a long history of African Americans being in the corporate workforce. So when people go, well, I don't understand. You got 1 in 5 federal workers are African American, because the federal government was really one of the only places that black people could get jobs. And so now if you expand that to state government, county government, school district, one of the reasons African Americans over-index in government jobs is because we were frozen out of corporate America. Literally, that's not an opinion. That is undeniable fact. So you're frozen out of corporate jobs. You're frozen out of capital, investment, loans, private equity, all those different things. Well, then you get to a point now where you have less than 2% of African American businesses getting venture capital. Now, here's what's insane about that. If you are public workers, just stand up. If you work for the city, county, state, if you're a public worker, stand up. Just stand up. Stand up. Okay, now I want y'all. Now, stay standing, stay standing, stay standing, stay standing. This is participatory conversation. I want y'all to look around the people who are standing up. The people standing up actually are the wealthiest people in America. Now, y'all look at me like he done lost his mind. I need you to understand that the people who are standing up, their pensions fund America. The venture capitalists come to the state of Wisconsin, New Jersey, California, New York, Texas, in order to get pension fund money to invest in those companies. And so that's what drives Wall Street. That's what drives Silicon Valley. It's pension funds. Now here's the problem. Now look at the people who are standing up. What do they look like? They don't look like private equity. They don't look like venture capitalists. So we're trying to change the system at the top when those folk, they depend on the money of these people to actually drive private equity. Y'all can take a seat. So I need us to understand this economic system that we're in, where literally you've got Black, Latino, Asian American, Native American, women who are public workers, and sorry, white guys, that's who's also controlling the capital. So we're fighting this whole battle. And so when you start looking at how we got here today, it was literally being excluded from the economic infrastructure. And so you can't say, well, man, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I got to have some boots.
Gotta have some material to make some boots.
Right. And it's hard for people to fathom that, because I think too many of us are walking around wholly ignorant of American history. And so that's what we're facing right now. And so now the issue is, once you have, and again, this is, if you're Republican, that's fine, but when Republicans say we want smaller government, what does that mean? Layoffs. Who are the people being laid off? Those folks have houses, kids in college, things that they fund. 325,000 black women have been laid off in the last 7 months. 325,000. And so so when we talk about cuts, we're not understanding when you say cut, okay, I get it. We all have businesses and we have to maximize profit. But the issue that you face is when you cut hundreds of thousands, what are you seeing in Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia? Massive number of homes now on the market. You have not seen that number of homes. We're in a housing crisis because between 2000, because of the home foreclosure crisis in 2007, 2008, 2009, we built fewer homes between 2010 and 2020. Last time we built those fewer homes was in the 1940s. So one of the reasons we have a housing crisis right now, because we didn't build enough housing stock between 2010 and 2020, and then also the present day. And then we allow private equity to own single-family homes, and so now Wall Street is charging folk out the wazoo, and they don't want to sell because they know people have to live. So these are things that we have to confront, but we have to be honest in that African Americans were completely frozen out of corporate jobs. When you talk about housing, redlining, discrimination, all that sort of stuff. And so now we are seeing the effects of that, in that my generation, post-civil rights movement baby, being able to go to college, being able to do better than parents, that changed for some of us. But this is what we are facing. And so when we talk about inclusion, then I hear the critics get mad with that. I go, well, how is it you are against inclusion? And then you want to deny what, because I damn sure wasn't included then.
Correct.
So you're upset that we're saying include me now because I wasn't included then, and then somebody says, well, that wasn't me.
Right.
I wasn't behind that. I'm like, yeah, but somebody was.
And you're upholding the ideology.
Right. And so this is the stuff that we hate to confront, but this is literally American history. This is Wisconsin history. It's Milwaukee history. And so if we don't be honest about it and say, again, if you're going to shut down inclusive programs, and we talk about even diversity, equity, and inclusion, what is so insane to me is that you actually have to create a program to do what's right anyway.
Exactly.
See,
yeah.
If you were doing what's right, you don't need a program. I mean, that's how insane. And I know somebody sitting there going, yeah, okay, but I'm not sure. Bari Williams worked into Silicon Valley when she was I think it was Facebook. She has a book out. This is a perfect example. Applications would come in for their college programs. And the person in charge, who was a white woman, because we had the conversation, she would go, oh, I've never heard of this school. Not, wait a minute, let me look at the applicant.
Right.
There was a clear bias in that, oh, this is not a top tier school. So folks there, they had never heard of Spelman. They had never heard of Howard. They'd never heard of Florida A&M. So for them, I don't even know what this school is. Because for them, in their minds, it's only Stanford, Harvard, Yale, Columbia. Now, because Bari is at the table, she's like, hey, no, we're not doing that. I know about this school. So they were missing out on amazing applicants because of their bias. Because they said, oh, I don't know the school. If we want to be honest, that happens in hiring every single day. So now what does it mean? You now are missing out on amazing talent, and then you want to tell me about, well, merit. Well, how? Oh, so now it's merit. Because you hooked up your boy. But with me, it's merit. And that's what we have to deal with. This actually happens. And so now, if you get rid of programs, then you aren't forced to do things. And this is where the CEOs, this is where we're going to find out if we have real CEOs or bullshit CEOs. When Al Newharth was the CEO of Gannett, he said, we're going to be the most diverse media company in the country. He said, because we cannot cover America if we don't look like America. And he said, I'm going to tie bonuses to diversity. He said, I want to know if you're interviewing diverse candidates. He said, and we're going to change this whole system. He said, and if you do not like what we're doing, you are more than welcome to leave. And the people who left, here's why that was critical. Within a year, they became the most diverse media company in the country. But you know what then happened? Knight Ridder said, damn, we gotta pay attention because we're losing talent. What happened? Cox Enterprises. Gannett literally forced a change in the entire industry because as the largest company, they said, we're making this a priority. When I spoke at Walmart on the MOK program several years ago, the CEO was sitting right there. I told him, I said, you have the power to literally change corporate America all by yourself. if you're willing to do it. There are daily flights between Bentonville, Arkansas, and New York City. Now, I had to catch a connecting flight from Dulles Airport in D.C. to Detroit to get to here. How in the hell is there a direct flight from Bentonville, Arkansas, multiple in a day in New York City? Because of Walmart. And so this is what I'm talking about, where if we are going to focus on inclusion, we're going to need CEOs to say, I don't need a program to do what's right. So I'm going to make sure I have the right people in place who hire, who are going to vet properly, who are not going to weed people out, who are going to create programs when it comes to contracting. And listen, you can create race-neutral situation when it comes to contracts. You can create opportunities to say, we're going to emphasize local businesses. We're going to emphasize businesses of a certain size. That's not race. That's all very doable. Because again, if you do that, now all of a sudden, 95% of all black-owned businesses do $5 million in revenue or less. So one of the reasons you can't build capacity, because you don't have access to the contracts. I go to more events and they go, Roland, it's about capital. I'm like, no, it's not. They're like, why? I said, I have no personal debt. I have no business debt. I own everything in my business. I don't need capital. I need contracts. Because if I get contracts, contract is capital.
Correct.
I said, so I don't want no loan. I don't want a line of credit. I don't need that. I said, damn it, I need advertising. Mm-hmm. This is what we have to recognize. And if we do not pay attention to this in 5, 10, 15 years, what we're going to have is we're going to have a wide gap of people who are at the bottom. And we now know with AI, you're now talking about customer service jobs. So that entire middle sector that actually created where we are in America the last 75 years, that middle section of jobs, bank teller jobs, gone. Grocery clerk jobs, gone. All of those jobs. So we're going to have truly the have and have-nots. And I don't think people understand what it could look like economically in 20 years if we ignore the attacks on DEI. DEI is not a person who's hired. It literally is a concept to say we can't not continue to do business the way we used to do business.
So let me
and as Target, what it feels like when you piss off black people.
With your CEO.
Well, they made him executive chairman, but again, I need people to understand. You talk about $1.6 trillion spending power, and for all the people who are upset and mad, just pull up Dr. King's sermon on April 3rd, 1968 at the Mason Temple, his last sermon, where he literally said the very same thing. In that sermon, he said, we don't have to throw a Molotov cocktail. We don't have to yell. We don't have to yell and scream. He said, we can withdraw our money. And he specifically named companies in that sermon that they were targeting. So if anybody got a problem with boycotting and withdrawing our money, but you love Dr. King, he the one who said it. And that's what Operation Breadbasket was all about. But see, that's that King we don't want to talk about. Go right ahead.
So let me ask this. How does shutting out black businesses affect other communities of color? Because I think, so you know the time we in, right? We both know. And we know that a lot of businesses didn't understand that they were considered DEI, right? Or diverse businesses until these recent attacks have started happening and now they're being affected. But we always know that there's been an attack, right, on our businesses. So walk us through that.
Well, again, it's a tree. I mean, everything has a cascade effect. So if you say, I'm going to lay off federal workers, and again, we know 1 in 5 is African American. So I'm going to lay off federal workers. Okay, that's federal workers. Now when you see what DOGE has been doing with the attacks on funding programs, now you're talking about grants and other different things. So what that's been doing is it's literally impacting your nonprofits. It's impacting the businesses that the nonprofits employ. Now we're talking about, again, this thing has gone all the way down to even, let's take Susan Taylor's National Cares Mentoring Gala. Here's an initiative that is focused on creating mentors for troubled kids all across the country. A week before their gala, a major financial institution said, "Oh yeah, I know we committed the dollars to this, but we're pulling out." They were a platinum level sponsor. Most of the African Americans in the companies that were sponsoring their gala, those folks had gotten laid off. Now, what's down the impact? Well, that gala has vendors. Now you're impacting vendors. Well, those vendors employ people. Fewer business, not enough work for employees. Now those employees are impacted. Now the families of the employees are impacted. So it's literally a cascading effect when you talk. So it's not just that job. It's everything that flows down from that. And so you're actually seeing that. So you're seeing, I've had businesses on my show, and they had anywhere from $2 to $3 to $5 million in contracts completely frozen. Well, what did they do? They actually had scaled up, made purchases or whatever, anticipating that business. Now that contract is completely in limbo. Now they're stuck. That's happening right now all across the country in every single field. And so I don't think people, you're talking about the federal government, you're talking about almost $700 billion annually in contracts. That's contracts. That's not grants. So you take the contracts, then the billions in grants. So now you're talking about a complete punch to the gut of that whole infrastructure. And we're seeing it. And it's going to really show up. It's really going to show up in the next 6 months. The tariffs are going to show up in the next 6 months. Okay. I was reading one story about this one woman. She had a business and she was really upset. In an article, she said her dad voted for Trump and he's been writing letters to the White House. And I'm like, thoughts and prayers. I mean, again, it's amazing to me how many people cannot read. They literally said we doing this. And folk like, I can't believe it's happening. I'm like, did you not read that section? So the shirt she's wearing, Anthony Scaramucci and I, y'all saw me on ABC this week when I smacked him around because he thought he was all that. I did. So he had a quote, and I had to put it on a t-shirt. His quote was, MAGA chose between woke or broke. They chose broke. Y'all, there are people right now in Kentucky. Look at the folks in Texas. 130 died in the flood, and they could testify, but they focus on changing 5 districts. I think folk have to recognize there are economic repercussions to your vote. And there are people who are now realizing, I thought they were talking about them. I'm like, no, player, they were talking about you. You too. They were talking about you. We were trying to tell you, but you wasn't listening. So there's a lot of people who had Medicaid about to get a rude awakening. And I'm telling you, this is just, and people have to just be honest about when we make decisions. And this is a historical fact. And if you want to contest me, knock yourself out, but you're going to lose this one. At every stage when black people fought for rights, it improved the economic condition of poor white Americans.
You better say that.
It's a fact.
That is a fact.
It's a simple fact. If when you look right now, publicly financed education, America should be thanking black people. Absolutely. Because it was formerly enslaved people of African descent who was elected to the legislature in South Carolina. And those former slaves said, we could have been killed if we were caught reading. So it must be something about that damn book. And they didn't want us to do. South Carolina, they passed publicly financed education. And then when Reconstruction was over and the Great Compromise of 1877 took place, Jim Crow came in. They got rid of all kind of stuff, but they kept that. That's impacted. When I talk about, again, when you talk about rights, if you are gay and you appreciate same-sex marriage, might want to thank black people. That's the 14th Amendment, one of the Reconstruction Amendments. If you are disabled and you appreciate the 1996 American with Disabilities Act, you might want to thank black people, because that's a provision of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And again, if you are a woman and then you are a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, an architect in those professional schools, hey, you might want to thank black people, because Title IX was not about sports.
That's right.
Title IX was opening the professional schools up and saying if you get federal funding, you cannot discriminate. After Title IX was passed in 72, it exploded with women in professional schools. And no one ever asked, well, I keep hearing Title IX. Where does that come from? That's a provision of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Yep. If you're Korean, Chinese, if you vote in your native language, you might want to thank black people, because that's the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Yep. So the history is clear. At every point of American history, when African Americans fought for rights for us, it impacted a whole bunch of other people. And last point, when I mentioned earlier about affirmative action benefiting white women, there was a racist named Homer Judge Smith out of Virginia, and he thought he could kill the 64 Civil Rights Act by adding the provision of women. Women were not included in the initial law. They put it in, it actually got more votes. So the reason women and white women have benefited from that is because black people fought for the 1964 Civil Rights Act. That is simply facts.
So with everything that's going on with the attacks, okay, and you just laid out the perfect history, right, in a very succinct way, do you think that black people should continue to stay at the table and fight for inclusion, knowing how everybody...
Oh, hell yeah. Now, we can't even remotely think about not fighting. But again, this is a moment where the real people who are going to be challenged are so-called allies.
Let's talk about the allies.
I mean, I'm just being straight up.
Yeah.
And when I say allies, this is not a black, white, brown thing. This is not a male-female thing. This is literally an American thing. You cannot. It's like we're dealing with this stupidity of having the National Guard on the streets in Washington, D.C. And it ain't like he respected anything as well. But I'm going to tell you, listen, when Trump was there the first time, I got invited to. So typically, whoever's in the Oval Office, you see how I don't use the word president with him. They invite TV anchors to various meetings. So I got invited to 3 of those, and I went to 2. So I remember one of those, they were having this long conversation about immigration. And then somebody mentioned Chicago. I said, let's talk about Chicago. And Trump says, you know, when Rahm Emanuel, when he was mayor of Chicago, he's like, well, he was in my office. We talked about crime, and he was talking about education, economics. He said, looked at Rahm and said, Rahm, that doesn't fix crime. And I was like, that's a lie. If you ask any police chief, they'll tell you, police do not deter crime. Because crime happens, and then they come on the scene afterwards. Any police chief worth their salt will tell you, the way you confront crime is if you confront the conditions that create crime. It's just a fact.